It's been a while since I posted a new video, and I'm sorry about that. Life seems to take its own course, and distractions are plentiful. But here I am again. This episode is all about the myth of the hot day. Yes, myth. I know you've always been told in tours, films, short stories, novels, nonfiction books, and TV shows that the day of the murders, August 4th, was one of the hottest days of the year. I think I might have tracked the origins of the story and understand why the myth began. But I also want to trace the effects of such an idea and how it colored our modern understanding of this most enigmatic case. Will any of this solve the mystery? Well, no. In fact, it matters little in terms of the events of August 4th. But don't you want to know the reality of circumstances instead of continuing and perpetrating the falsity of this part of the story? Some authors have used this hot day myth as a kind of a character in the tale, as a key that somehow unlocks the mystery and creating a most uncomfortable environment whereby murder was possible. We must also appreciate the level of hotness one can bear. The temperature point where one is uncomfortable varies from person to some degree, pun intended. The reasons are aplenty. Number one, biological differences. Metabolism. People with higher metabolic rates generate more body heat and may feel warmer. Body composition. Fat is an insulator. So those with higher body fat percentages may retain more heat, making them feel hotter. Muscle mass also generates heat. Sweat glands. Some people naturally sweat more, which helps cool them down more efficiently. Number two, acclimation. People who live in hot climates tend to adapt over time. Their bodies become more efficient at cooling down, so they might tolerate higher temperatures better than someone from a cooler climate. Conversely, someone used to cold weather might find moderate heat overwhelming. Number three, hydration and health conditions. Dehydration makes it harder for your body to regulate temperature. Medical conditions like hyperthyroidism or menopause can make someone more sensitive to heat. And medications such as antidepressants or beta blockers can also affect heat tolerance. Number four, age and gender. Older adults generally have a harder time regulating body temperature. Women tend to have slightly higher core body temperatures than men, but they may feel cooler or warmer due to hormonal differences. And number five, clothing and activity level. What someone is wearing and how active they are affect the perception of temperature. So yes, two people can absolutely feel different in the same heat. One might be sweating and uncomfortable, while another feels perfectly fine. First, let's start at the beginning. What do the witnesses who testified at the Inquest preliminary hearing and trial have to say about that day? And secondly, what do the various chroniclers of the case have to say? And finally, we will examine the weather reports for that week and day. Let's look at all of it. Lizzie herself is questioned about it. In fact, if you read just those statements about the temperature that day, it seems as if Hosea Norton, as the district attorney at the inquest, is a bit obsessed with making August 4th into as hot a day as there ever was in Fall River. This tactic will play again at the trial, especially in his closing statements.
You do not remember of talking about washing the windows?
I don't remember whether I did or not. I don't remember it. Yes, I remember. Yes, I asked her to shut the parlor blinds when she got through, because the sun was so hot.
When you got through looking for lead, did you come down?
No, sir. I went to the west window over the hay to the west window, and the curtain was slanted a little. I pulled it down.
What else?
Nothing.
That is all you did?
Yes, sir.
That is the second story of the barn?
Yes, sir.
Was the window open?
I think not.
Hot?
Very hot.
How long do you think you were up there?
Not more than 15 or 20 minutes, I should not think.
Should you think what you have told me would occupy 4 minutes?
Yes, because I ate some pears up there.
Do you think all you have told me would take you 4 minutes?
I ate some pears up there.
I asked you to tell me all you did.
I told you all I did.
Have you now told me everything you did up in the second story of the barn?
Yes, sir.
I now call your attention and ask you to say whether all you have told me. I don't suppose you stayed there any longer than necessary.
No, sir, because it was close.
I suppose that was the hottest place there was on the premises.
I should think so.
You were feeling better than you were in the morning?
I felt better in the morning than I did the night before.
That is not what I asked you. You were then, when you were in that hot loft, looking out of the window and eating 3 pears, feeling better, were you not, than you were in the morning when you could not eat any breakfast?
I never eat any breakfast.
You did not answer my question, and you will, if I have to put it all day. Were you then, when you were eating those 3 pears in that hot loft, looking out of that closed window, feeling better than you were in the morning when you ate no breakfast?
I was feeling well enough to eat the pears.
I ask you again to explain to me why you took those pears from the pear tree.
I did not take them from the pear tree.
From the ground, wherever you took them from. I thank you for correcting me, going into the barn, going upstairs into the hottest place in the barn, in the rear of the barn, the hottest place, and there standing and eating those pears that morning?
I beg your pardon. I was not in the rear of the barn. I was in the other end of the barn that faced the street.
The preliminary hearing only touches on the temperature in general that day and focuses on the inside of the house. We see it emerge in the questioning of Dr. Dolan.
You spoke of repairing to this house the 4th of August at a certain hour?
Yes, sir.
Was that a pleasant day?
It surely was not a rainy day.
Was it a very hot day?
It was, sir.
Whenever you went there, the sun was about meridian?
Yes, sir.
Take a reasonably healthy person who suddenly dies, and the body is found in the middle of the day in the warm season, a very hot day of that season. How soon, in your opinion, will that body become cool?
Well, various bodies differ. I could not give you any general answer to that question, any specific answer to that question.
How hot is this room?
I should say about 80.
Then comes the trial, an emphasis on the temperature of August 4th. As we read through these questions, statements, and answers, note the emphasis placed by the prosecution to the hottest day of the year mantra. District Attorney William H. Moody's trial opening for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
August 4th, 1892, was one of the hottest days of the last summer in this vicinity. The loft of the barn was almost stifling in the intensity of its heat. At 10:40, Mrs. Kelly left her house for a dental appointment. As she passed the Borden home, she saw Mr. Borden coming around the house from the side entrance and fumbling with some keys. At 10:42, Mr. Borden was trying unsuccessfully to unlock the front door. They exchanged morning greetings. Mrs. Kelly's sprightly, "Good morning, it's been another hot day," was answered tersely by the frustrated 70-year-old man, wilting in the heat, unable to get into his house.
Then the focus comes to the barn loft and how hot it was up there when Lizzie went looking for lead for a sinker.
She had gone to the barn loft, which on a sultry August morning was hotter than Gehenna. The axing to death of Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Borden in the house in Fall River, Massachusetts, on a brutally hot morning in August 1892.
Then the police have their say.
Wait a moment now. Did you notice what the temperature was in the loft of the barn as you went up there?
Well, I know it was hot, that is all. Very hot. You know it was a hot day.
Did you notice the temperature of the loft when you went up?
It was very hot.
John Fleet testified.
How was the temperature in the barn in the afternoon? How was it up there in the afternoon?
Very hot.
What sort of a day generally was it in Fall River that day with respect to heat?
It was very hot, one of the hottest days I think we had had.
And Philip Harrington testified,
Now, can you give any other description of the atmosphere except that it was very hot?
Not until the pitching of the hay round. I noticed then it contained considerable dust. Very disagreeable breathing there.
What was the temperature in that loft of the barn?
As to degrees, I cannot say, but it was extremely hot.
Then a more general temperature question about August 4th, which then moves once again to the loft temperature. City Marshal Rufus B. Hilliard testified.
What sort of day was it with reference to heat on the 4th day of August last?
Very hot.
How was the heat in the loft?
Well, it was extremely warm there, almost suffocating heat.
By way of contrast, one defense witness, Thomas Barlow, had this to say about the weather on that day. And remember, he has no vested interest in the outcome of the trial.
How was the heat up in the barn compared with it out in the sun?
It was cooler up in the barn than it was outdoors.
This was not the answer that the prosecution wanted, and had built up to be the truth of the hot temperatures in the barn. You can even hear the exasperation and incredulity in the prosecution's questions.
Now, did I understand you to say it was cooler up in the barn loft than it was anywhere else?
Yes, sir.
It was a cool place, was it?
Yes, sir.
You recall, do you, that barn loft was a place where the roof is sloping, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And hangs right down low on the sides?
Yes, sir.
And isn't very high anyhow?
No, sir.
And not a very large room?
No, sir.
What do you suppose made that so much cooler than the rest of the country?
I couldn't say. It is always warmer in the house, I should say, than outdoors.
And you should think the barn loft was cooler than any place you found that day?
Yes, sir.
You mean that, do you?
Yes, sir.
So why do you think the police had this view of the temperature? Could it be because of the way they were attired? Here is a picture of a summer police uniform from 1910 in Cranston, Rhode Island. While not forced to wear the long woolen coat of the summer months, these officers wore a shirt, tie, vest, jacket, and coat, in addition to a hat. I think that no matter the temperature outside, I would be quite hot in clothing such as this. As I said before, hot is a relative term, depending on who is feeling it. This is a group shot of the police on patrol in Cranston in 1898. Note the mix of summer and winter attire. In the 19th century, police uniforms in the United States were heavily influenced by British styles. Officers typically wore dark-colored woolen garments, which included long coats and high-collared tunics. Headgear often consisted of hardened top hats or custodian helmets. These uniforms were designed more for authority and presence than for comfort, and there was little differentiation between summer and winter attire. Here is a picture of a Fall River police officer, date unknown. And here is the Fall River Police Department in 1900 in front of the Armory in Fall River. Note their attire. Now let's take a gander at the closing arguments of District Attorney Knowlton, where he pushes the idea of the hot temperatures on August 4th with hyperbole and emphatic statements. He clearly wants his last words to the jurors to be remembered as they deliberate. He transposes the idea of the hot barn loft, which is the only thing he questions witnesses about, to the temperature of the day in question. A broad brush indeed. Closing arguments of District Attorney Knowlton.
She said she remained up in the barn about a half an hour. I then asked her what she meant by up in the barn. She said, I mean up in the barn upstairs, sir. She said, after she had been up there about half an hour, she came down again, went into the house, and found her father lying on the lounge. I assert that the story is simply absurd. I assert that story is not within the bounds of reasonable possibilities. There is not a man of you does not remember that day. There is not a man of you that does not remember the hour of the day when the tidings of that murder were flashed to you. There is not a man of you that does not remember that day, which was within 4 days of being the very midsummer day of one of the hottest summers within our remembrance, was hot to a degree by which this very day upon which I am talking to you is cool and comfortable by comparison. You are asked to believe that, being engaged in an occupation which of itself would be heating, the ironing of those handkerchiefs, she left that job on the eve of its completion and went out of the house and up in the barn to the hottest place in Fall River, and there remained during the entire time that was covered by the absence of Bridget upstairs. This was at the hour of the day when the sun is right over the barn roof. This was a building that had been shut up for a year, and no air allowed to get to it. This was a place hot beyond the power of description, and yet you are asked to believe that this woman chose that place, that time and that hour, to be out of the way when the assassin should strike the blow that killed her father. It was necessary that she should be in the loft. It was not only the hottest place in all this hot day, this hot city, this hot country. It was the only place where she could put herself and not have known what took place.
It is most interesting that all these prosecution witnesses really believed what they were led to believe on a day from 10 months previous. And isn't it interesting that Thomas Barlow, a witness for the defense, a person without a vested interest in the outcome of the case, contradicted the police in every way? Now let's look at the chroniclers of the case. Edwin Porter, The Fall River Tragedy, 1893. The hot sunshine of an exceptionally warm midsummer day. Edmund Pearson, The Trial of Lizzie Borden, 1937. A sultry day of typical August weather, a day as the hours advanced toward noon of almost intolerable heat. Okay, so they're learning from each other. Edward Radin, Lizzie Borden, The Untold Story, 1961. There's several quotes here. Lizzie gave varying degrees for her trip to the barn. To police, she elaborated on her story. She had not visited just the barn, but had gone into the hayloft, this on the hottest day of the year. Later, the legend of Lizzie Borden began on a sweltering hot morning of August 4th, 1892, in Fall River, Massachusetts. On that day of steaming heat, it was later charged in court, Lizzie Borden quietly slipped into the second-floor guest bedroom where her stepmother was completing the final touches to making a bed. And later, as the untold story of Lizzie Borden unfolds, I believe that the reader will be able to detect the identity of the long unsuspected killer who used an axe on Mr. and Mrs. Borden on that scorching hot August day in Fall River. And again, the morning murder, Thursday, August 4th, 1892, dawned hot and clear. The heat and the humidity had been rising steadily all week and was still going up. The movements within the house of all 5 people had been accounted for until about 9 o'clock in the morning. Then there is a gap of 2 hours. And, in addition to insinuating that no such box existed, the prosecution during the trial also offered 2 points to prove that Lizzie could not have been upstairs in the barn. The first was that it was too hot in the loft for anybody to remain there as long as Lizzie claimed she had. A group of officers were placed on the stand and all solemnly testified that they had been very hot up in the loft, as if it had not been very hot everywhere in Fall River that steaming morning. Officer Harrington was overly anxious to show how hot it was. He said that the loft window was closed when it had really been open, and then had to retract his testimony. With an open window and an open barn door, it was not quite as closed up there as the prosecution tried to make out. And lastly, it was the hottest day of the year. Bridget woke up not feeling well. And that's all from Radin. He seems to press the issue. So from Victoria Lincoln, A Private Disgrace in 1967. August 4th, 1892 was hot even at dawn. It became the hottest day in memory for all who lived in Fall River. We're getting more extreme here. Wait till we get to Spearing. Robert Sullivan, from the book Lizzie Borden, 1974. The newly risen sun was blazing hot, signaling that the severe heat wave, which had prostrated Fall River for 3 days, was continuing. And Frank Spearing, his book Lizzie, 1984. In Fall River, temperatures were hotter than anyone remembered, well over 100 degrees. Frank always takes everything to the extreme. Arnold Brown, Lizzie Borden, The Legend, the Truth, the Final Chapter, 1991. Repeatedly placing it as the hottest day of the year. He starts off, "It was hot, and Ellen Egan was sweating. As she headed home, Ellen realized it was hotter than she remembered it, but she didn't care. As she neared the Borden house on her way up the hill, she wondered if that silly girl was still washing the windows. Never in a million years would she even think about washing windows in this hot weather." David Kent, 40 Wax, New Evidence in the Life and Legend of Lizzie Borden, 1992. "It was another record hot day." And "It is a commentary on Andrew's rigid formality that even on the hottest day of the year he donned his reefer rather than relax in shirt-sleeved comfort in the privacy of his home." And finally, "Someone had to say there were two things about the Borden murders that once heard could never be forgotten. The jingle about 40 Wax and this breakfast menu served on the hottest morning of the year." In an article titled "That Sticky Weather Issue" in the October 1993 issue of the Lizzie Borden Quarterly, the late Ed Tebow, who studied the case for decades, adds this tidbit.
Andrew Borden, upon arriving home that August 4th morning, performs a rather strange act. His down-street activities were cut short that morning. He may not have fully recovered from his nausea attack the night before, or possibly he was feeling the effects of the alleged heat of the day. Immediately upon entering the house, however, he removed his Prince Albert jacket and put on a cardigan sweater. I will accept that he was a man of age, but if he were experiencing the ill feelings of the heat, why did he need a sweater? If he were affected by the heat, it seems to me he would have wanted to attempt to make himself cooler, not warmer. Along with this strange behavior is the statement made by Lizzie while aiding to her father's comfort as he prepared to lie down on the sofa. After lying down, he is asked by Lizzie if he wanted the window left the way it was or if he felt a draft. Where did this draft come from if it were a hot and humid day?
Dr. Dolan confirms.
What did the body of Mr. Borden have on?
On the outside, a cardigan jacket, that is a woolen jacket, black vest and black trousers, and a pair of Congress shoes.
So what was the temperature on August 4th, 1892? We have varying numbers, but here is what was reported in the newspapers. The Fall River Daily Herald of August 4th, 1892, posted at 2 o'clock their miniature almanac. It listed the daily thermometer. 8 a.m., 74 degrees, noon, 80 degrees, 2 p.m., 80 degrees, highest, 80 degrees, lowest, 69 degrees. So was there a heat wave? The Fall River Daily Herald lists the following from Monday, August 1st to Thursday, August 4th. The temperature ranges on Monday were a high of 66 and a low of 60. August 2nd, a high of 66 and the low of 60. Wednesday, the high of 78, a low of 63. And Thursday, a high of 80 and the low of 69. In Leonard Rebello's Lizzie Borden Past and Present, he includes weather reports because many newspapers did not list the exact temperatures but talked about the weather forecast or the weather reported. So the weather report for a Tuesday evening, August 2nd, for Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts showed showers followed by clearing weather, cooler in the interior, easterly winds shifting north. That was from the Fall River Daily Globe. The weather reported until Tuesday night, August 2nd, cloudy and unsettled, slightly warmer, variable winds, generally easterly to southerly. Wednesday, fair and cooler. That was from the Fall River Daily Herald. Weather report for Wednesday evening, August 3rd, for New England, fair, preceded today by showers on the coast, slightly warmer, southeasterly winds. Fall River Daily Globe. Weather report for Wednesday night, August 3rd, 1892. Continued cloudy, cool weather, easterly winds becoming variable. Herald office temperature at 8 a.m. 61, 12 noon 66, 2 p.m. 66, high 66, low 60, Fall River Daily Herald. And the weather report until Thursday night, August 4th. Fair, preceded by coast showers today, warmer Thursday, variable winds. Herald office temperature, 8 a.m. 66, noon 72, 2 p.m. 76. The high was 78, and the low was 63. Fall River Daily Herald. So the temperatures for the first week of August do not represent a heat wave. According to the United States Weather Bureau, a heat wave is 3 consecutive days of temperatures 90 degrees or more. There was nothing close to 90 degrees for that entire week. So where does this come from? It comes from District Attorney Hosea Knowlton. In his summation, he referred several times to how hot it was that morning, and that the barn loft was the hottest place in this hot day, this hot city, this hot country. He was trying to buttress his contention that Lizzie lied about going to the barn loft that morning to look for sinkers and eat pears. In the process, Knowlton created a myth that has endured. Until next time.